My boss fired me after I tripled his profits. I built a rival company and stole his biggest clients overnight. But on that Tuesday evening, as the office emptied and the cleaning crew began their nightly ritual, I was still blissfully unaware of tomorrow's betrayal. I'd stayed behind, fueled by my fourth espresso and the intoxicating proximity of everything I'd worked toward for 4 grueling years. I still remember the exact shade of blue in Carl's tie, the day I realized I'd given my soul to the wrong company. Royal blue with silver pinstripes, the same tie he wore to every important meeting, the same tie he'd be wearing when he'd drive the knife into my back 24 hours later. "Don't stay too late, Eliza," Carl had said, patting my shoulder with that practiced fatherly touch he'd perfected. "But make sure those quarterly projections sing. The board needs to be blown away tomorrow." He didn't need to tell me twice. These projections weren't just numbers on slides. They were my audition for the seat I'd earned 10 times over. Vice President of Strategy at Langston & Co., the corner office with the skyline view, and the 6-figure salary bump that would finally make my student loans feel less like a life sentence. As his footsteps faded down the hallway, I turned back to my computer, the glow of the screen illuminating the darkening office. Outside my window, Chicago's business district twinkled to life as if cheering me on. 4 years earlier, I'd walked into this building with nothing but an MBA, pathological determination, and a pantsuit I could barely afford. Now I managed our largest accounts, had tripled client retention, and had personally dragged the company's dusty systems into the current decade. "I've got this, Carl," I'd replied with the easy confidence that comes from knowing your own worth. "They'll be singing by morning." Carl's words from last week's executive meeting still rang in my ears. "Eliza's the reason we're seeing these numbers, folks. Nobody works harder or smarter. Nobody." My phone buzzed. It was Danny, my younger sister. I clicked through the presentation, perfecting transitions and sharpening language. Each slide represented countless late nights, missed birthdays, relationships sacrificed on the altar of ambition. Was it worth it? The question flickered briefly before being smothered by certainty. After tomorrow, everything would change. The promotion was practically mine already. Absolutely. Wouldn't miss it. Just finishing something big at work. I winced. I'd completely forgotten. Again. Still coming for Mom's birthday dinner on Saturday? The lie came easily after years of practice. Truth was, I'd probably need to rain check once the VP announcement happened. There would be transition meetings, strategy sessions, client calls to navigate. Mom would understand. She always did. "She's turning 60, Liz. Don't you dare flake this time." I set the phone down without responding. Guilt could wait, destiny couldn't. I saved the file, emailed it to Carl with a succinct "ready to wow them tomorrow," and began packing up. My reflection in the darkened window looked exhausted but victorious. Hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, dark circles under determined eyes, posture still impeccable despite the 14-hour workday. By 11:30 p.m., my presentation was immaculate. 42 slides of irrefutable evidence that Langston & Co. had transformed under my strategies. The clients I'd personally secured had generated $4.2 million in the last quarter alone. Our digital transformation initiative, which I'd championed despite Carl's initial resistance, had cut operational costs by 22%. I'd even included a roadmap for the next fiscal year, showcasing my vision for expanding into emerging markets. "You did it, Eliza," I whispered to myself. 4 years of grinding, of being the first one in and the last one out. 4 years of brilliant solutions and silent suffering. 4 years of earning this moment. The elevator descended, and so did my guard. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to feel genuine excitement. I thought about calling Mom to share the news, but decided against jinxing it. Better to call her tomorrow with the official title. I smiled. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped inside, already mentally rehearsing my acceptance speech for tomorrow's promotion. I'd be humble, but confident. Grateful, but assertive. I'd make sure everyone knew this was just the beginning of what I could accomplish for Langston & Co. As I waited for the elevator, my phone lit up with Carl's response. "Excellent work as always. See you bright and early." As the cab pulled away from the curb, I noticed a sleek black Audi parked near the entrance. Through the tinted windows, I could just make out Carl's silhouette in the passenger seat. Beside him was a younger woman I recognized instantly. Amanda, his niece, who joined the company 8 months ago in some nebulous special projects role that nobody could quite define. Outside, the night air was crisp with early autumn chill. I hailed a cab, giving the driver my address before sinking into the back seat. I lived only 15 minutes from the office, a deliberate choice that had cost me a fortune in rent, but saved countless hours in commuting time over the years. Hours I'd invested back into Langston & Co., probably discussing family matters, I thought. Amanda was nice enough, if somewhat underqualified and chronically unprepared. I'd had to save her during client presentations more than once when she confused basic financial terms. Just last month, she'd confidently explained gross margin to a client using the definition of net profit. I'd smoothly redirected the conversation before anyone could notice, and later sent her a friendly email with some helpful resources. The cab turned the corner and they disappeared from view. A fleeting uneasiness passed through me, but I dismissed it. Tomorrow was my day. Nothing could change that now. To Vice President Eliza Chen, I toasted myself, allowing a rare, genuine smile. I arrived home to my immaculate one-bedroom apartment, another sacrifice at the altar of convenience and career. I decorated it 3 years ago and barely changed a thing since. There simply hadn't been time. I kicked off my heels, poured a celebratory glass of wine, and sank onto my rarely used sofa. Tomorrow would change everything. I had no idea how right I was. I arrived at the office at 7:15 a.m. Earlier than usual, my presentation notes tucked neatly into my leather portfolio, a gift to myself after landing the Henderson account last year. The corridors were still quiet, but the conference room lights were already on. Through the glass walls, I could see Carl arranging papers, his royal blue tie perfectly knotted against his crisp white shirt. "Morning," I called cheerfully, stepping into the room. Presentations loaded and ready to go. Carl looked up, and for a split second, something flashed across his face. Discomfort? Guilt? It disappeared so quickly I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. "Eliza, good. We need to talk before the others arrive." My heart quickened. This was it, the private moment where he'd officially tell me about the promotion before announcing it publicly. I sat down across from him, smoothing my skirt and trying to maintain professional composure despite the excitement bubbling inside me. "I saw your presentation. Excellent work as always," he began, not quite meeting my eyes. "Thank you. I think the board will be impressed with our quarterly numbers." Carl nodded, shuffling papers unnecessarily. "About that, there's been a change of plans for today's meeting." A tiny alarm bell chimed in my brain, but I silenced it. "Oh? Yes. We'll still present the quarterly results, but..." He cleared his throat. "Eliza, the company is moving in a new direction. We're implementing some structural changes that..." The conference room door opened, and in walked 3 people I hadn't expected. Amanda, looking unusually professional in a tailored suit. Jeff from HR, carrying a manila folder, and Patricia Langston herself, the rarely seen company founder, who typically attended only the most critical meetings. My mouth went dry. This wasn't the pre-promotion chat I'd anticipated. "Good morning," Patricia said, her voice pleasant but detached. "Shall we begin?" Carl gestured for everyone to sit. "Eliza, as I was saying, the company is undergoing some strategic realignments. Patricia and the board have been discussing this for months." Months? My hands began to feel cold. If these discussions had been happening for months, why was this the first I'd heard of them? "We've decided to restructure several departments, including yours," Carl continued, his voice taking on that padded, rehearsed quality I'd heard him use when delivering difficult news to clients. "Restructure how?" I asked, my voice sounding distant even to myself. Patricia leaned forward. "We're consolidating leadership roles and creating a more streamlined executive team. Unfortunately, this means eliminating some positions." The world tilted sideways. Eliminating positions? I looked at Jeff's manila folder with new understanding. It almost certainly contained termination paperwork. "I don't understand," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Our department's performance has been exceptional. I've personally increased client retention by 300. "This isn't about performance," Carl interrupted. "Your work has been outstanding. This is purely a strategic business decision." I looked at Amanda, who was studying her manicure with sudden interest, and then it clicked. "You're firing me." The words hung in the air like smoke. Nobody denied them. "We prefer to call it a restructuring," Jeff said gently. opening his folder. The company is offering a generous severance package, 3 months' salary, and extended health benefits while you transition. Transition. Such a gentle word for being thrown away. I don't understand, I repeated, my brain refusing to process what was happening. If this is a restructuring, who's taking over my responsibilities? The awkward glances exchanged around the table told me everything before Carl cleared his throat again. Amanda will be stepping into the newly created role of Vice President of Strategy, overseeing the consolidated department. Amanda, Carl's niece, who couldn't tell gross margin from net profit, who had been with the company for less than a year, who I'd seen in Carl's car just last night, apparently discussing her promotion while I perfected the presentation that she would now deliver. I see, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded while inside. A hurricane was gathering force. We'd like you to clean out your desk by noon, Carl said, not meeting my eyes. For security reasons, Jeff will need to accompany you. Security reasons? As if I were a threat now. As if 4 years of dedication could turn into sabotage in an instant. The next hour passed in a blur. I signed papers without reading them, nodded at empty platitudes about staying in touch and using them as references, and somehow maintained my composure while Jeff watched me pack my personal items into a cardboard box. Photos, plants, the award I'd received last year for innovation, all tucked away like evidence of a life that suddenly no longer existed. As I was removing the last item, a small crystal paperweight a grateful client had given me, the conference room doors opened and the board members began filtering in for the meeting I'd spent all night preparing for. They glanced curiously at me packing up, but most quickly looked away, embarrassed by the rawness of witnessing someone's professional execution. Through the glass walls, I could see Carl standing at the head of the table, my presentation loaded on the screen behind him. Amanda sat in what should have been my chair, her posture relaxed and entitled. As I watched, she leaned over to whisper something to Carl, and they both laughed. That's when I noticed she was wearing a new blazer designer by the look of it, probably purchased in celebration of her upcoming promotion, a promotion that had been decided months ago, according to Carl, while I was still working 70-hour weeks, believing my dedication would be rewarded. When Jeff turned to answer a question from another employee, I quickly took out my phone and emailed myself a copy of the presentation I'd created. Not for any specific reason, just a small act of defiance, a tiny reclamation of my work before it was erased along with me. Ready? Jeff asked gently when he turned back. I nodded, picking up my box and straightening my shoulders. As we walked toward the elevator, I could teal eyes on me, some sympathetic, some curious, most simply relieved it wasn't them. The elevator doors opened with a cheerful ding that felt like mockery. As I stepped inside, I caught one last glimpse of the conference room, where Carl was now speaking animatedly, using my words, my research, my strategies, all now attributed to the company's brilliant new direction. The doors closed, and I began my descent, both literally and figuratively, from everything I'd worked for. I had given Langston & Co. 4 years of my life. They had given me 30 minutes to pack up and leave. The first week after being fired, I barely left my apartment. I cycled through emotions like TV channels, shock, disbelief, rage, humiliation, and then back to shock again. I'd wake up reaching for my phone to check work emails before remembering I had none to check. The severance package meant I didn't have to worry about rent immediately, but the silence of my days stretched out like an accusation. I ignored calls from my sister, sent a brief text canceling on Mom's birthday dinner, and ordered delivery return of cooking. On day 6, I found myself standing in front of my bathroom mirror at 2 p.m., still in pajamas, hair unwashed, staring at a stranger. Enough, I whispered to my reflection. They don't get to break you. That afternoon, I showered, dressed in real clothes, and walked to a cafe 6 blocks away, my first time leaving the apartment since the incident. As I'd started calling it in my head, I ordered coffee, opened my laptop, and began what I'd been avoiding, assessing the damage and planning my next move. The obvious path was to update my resume and start applying for similar positions at competing firms. With my track record, I'd probably land something within a month. But as I stared at the blank document, a different thought took shape. Not a desperate scramble for employment, but something more satisfying. I pulled up the presentation I'd emailed myself, my last creation for Langston & Co. As I scrolled through it, I wasn't seeing graphs and projections anymore. I was seeing a blueprint, a map of Langston's strengths and weaknesses, a guide to exactly where they were vulnerable. And I knew those vulnerabilities intimately. I opened a new document and began typing not a resume, but names. First, Langston's 3 biggest clients, the ones I'd personally cultivated and who had always dealt directly with me. Westridge Technologies, Blue Harbor Solutions, and Meridian Global. Together, they represented over 40% of Langston's annual revenue. Next, I listed key employees I respected. Nadia from Data Analytics, who'd confided her frustration with the outdated systems I'd tried to overhaul. Marco from Client Services, whose innovative ideas were repeatedly shelved by management. And Tyler, our brilliant but underappreciated lead engineer, who'd helped me modernize our client dashboards off the record because Carl wouldn't approve the official hours. Finally, I wrote down industry contacts who owed me favors, vendors who'd given me special rates, and potential investors who'd hinted they'd back me if I ever went out on my own. I sat back staring at the list in surprise. It was longer than I'd expected, much longer. My phone buzzed, a text from Danny. Mom was heartbroken. You missed her birthday, again. At least call her. Guilt stabbed through me. I'd been so wrapped up in my career that I'd neglected the people who actually cared about me. And for what? For a company that discarded me without a second thought. I dialed Mom's number. Eliza, she answered on the second ring, surprise evident in her voice. Is everything okay? No, I admitted, my voice cracking. I got fired, Mom. The confession unleashed everything, the whole story tumbling out between unexpected sobs. Mom listened quietly, making occasional sounds of sympathy and outrage. Oh, sweetheart, she said when I finished. I'm so sorry, that's incredibly unfair. I gave them everything, I whispered. Yes, she agreed. And that's precisely why they were able to take so much. Her words hit me like a splash of cold water. She was right. I'd handed over my talent, my ideas, my health, even my relationships, all to a company that saw me as nothing more than a replaceable asset. What are you going to do now? Mom asked. I looked down at my notes, at the list of names and connections I'd accumulated. I'm not sure yet, but I'm done working for people who don't value me. After we hung up, I felt lighter, clearer. I reopened my laptop and created a new folder titled ARC, short for architecture, as in rebuilding my life from the ground up. The next morning, I rented a small office in a co-working space downtown. Nothing fancy, just a private room with good Wi-Fi and a door that locked. I needed somewhere to work that wasn't tainted by constant reminders of failure. I spent the first day setting up, the act of arranging a physical space helping to organize my thoughts as well. By evening, I had created a skeleton business plan for what I was tentatively calling ARC Strategies, a boutique consulting firm specializing in exactly the services I'd perfected at Langston, but with the innovations Carl had always resisted. On day 2, I received a call from an unknown number. Eliza, it's Jim Westridge. My heart jumped. Jim was the CEO of Westridge Technologies, Langston's biggest client. We'd always had a good rapport, but I hadn't expected him to call. Jim, hello. What can I do for you? Well, that's the question, isn't it? He chuckled. I just sat through the most disastrous quarterly review I've ever experienced. Your replacement, Amanda, is it? Couldn't answer basic questions about our account. When I asked to speak with you instead, Carl gave some vague explanation about restructuring. I remained silent, letting him continue. Look, Eliza, I don't know what happened, and it's none of my business. But Westridge has been with Langston for 3 years, and you're the reason why. Our contract is up for renewal next month. And frankly, I'm hesitant to sign with whatever Langston is becoming. An opportunity was materializing faster than I dared hope. That's unfortunate to hear, I said carefully. Is there any chance you're still consulting, perhaps independently? Jim asked, his meaning crystal clear. I looked around my new office space, at the business plan on my screen, at the list of names I'd compiled. As a matter of fact, I am in the process of establishing a new venture. Perhaps we could discuss your needs over lunch next week. I'd like that very much, Jim replied. After we set a date and disconnected, I sat motionless, processing what had just happened. One of Langston's biggest clients had essentially offered to jump ship. And I hadn't even had to reach out first. I opened my contacts and scrolled to Nadia's name. She'd been unhappy at Langston for months. Would she consider a change? And what about Marco and Tyler? What had started as a vague notion of revenge was rapidly crystallizing into something more tangible, not just a way to get back at Carl, but a genuine opportunity to build something better, something mine. I picked up my phone and began to dial. It was time to turn betrayal into a blueprint. "Are you sure about this?" Nadia asked, her fingers hovering over the resignation letter on her desk. We were sitting in a quiet corner of a cafe 2 blocks from Langston's office, far enough to avoid being spotted by former colleagues. "I can't promise it won't be risky," I admitted. "But I can promise you'll be valued. Full creative control over the data analytics department, competitive salary, and equity in the company." Nadia had been Langston's top data analyst for 3 years. Like me, she'd been repeatedly promised advancement that never materialized. Unlike me, she still had a chance to leave on her own terms. "And you already have clients lined up?" Her dark eyes studied me skeptically. "My meeting with Westridge went better than expected," I said, allowing myself a small smile. Gim wasn't just unhappy with Amanda's performance. He's been dissatisfied with Langston's outdated approaches for months. He's bringing his business to Arc as soon as his contract expires next week. I didn't mention that I'd offered Westridge a 15% discount on their first year, a calculated loss that would pay dividends in reputation and momentum. Sometimes you had to sacrifice a pawn to capture the queen. Nadia took a deep breath and signed the letter. 2 weeks' notice, starting today. By the time she stood to leave, I'd already received a text from Marco confirming he was also submitting his resignation. 2 down, 1 to go. Tyler proved more challenging. As Langston's lead engineer, he'd been promised a substantial bonus if he stayed through the year. We met for drinks after work, and I laid out my proposal. "I can't match your bonus," I told him honestly, "but I can offer you something Langston never will. The chance to build our technical infrastructure from scratch. No legacy systems, no outdated protocols, plus profit sharing once we're established." Tyler twirled his beer glass thoughtfully. "Amanda's been having me patch the existing systems instead of upgrading them. Says it's more cost-effective." I nodded, unsurprised. Short-term thinking. "It'll cost them triple in emergency fixes within a year, which you and I will be available to handle at premium consulting rates." Tyler grinned, already seeing the strategy. "Exactly, but only if you're on my team, not theirs." He extended his hand. "When do I start?" The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. I secured a modest but professional office space in a converted industrial building across town, close enough to poach Langston's clients, far enough to establish our own identity. The open floor plan and exposed brick screamed innovative startup in a way Langston's staid corporate offices never could. I invested a significant portion of my savings in top-tier technology, sleek furnishings, and a professionally designed website that highlighted our team's combined expertise without directly mentioning Langston. My severance package covered initial operating costs, and a small business loan filled the gaps until revenue started flowing. Nadia and Marco joined immediately after their notice periods ended. Tyler negotiated an early release from Langston by agreeing to train his replacement, a junior engineer who would be overwhelmed the moment Tyler walked out. 1 month to the day after my firing, Arc Strategies officially launched. Our website went live at midnight. By 9 a.m., I was sitting across from Jim Westridge, signing the contract that would transfer Westridge Technologies' business from Langston to Arc. "Carl's going to have a heart attack," Jim commented, sliding the signed documents back to me. "Cardiac health isn't my concern anymore," I replied coolly, though secretly I was picturing Carl's face when he got the news. I didn't have to imagine for long. At 11:37 a.m., my phone rang, Carl's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called twice more before leaving a message. "Eliza, this is Carl. We need to talk about Westridge immediately. Call me back." I played the message for my team during our lunch celebration. Nadia raised her glass in a mock toast. To Carl's panic, may it be long-lived and thoroughly justified. We clinked glasses, but I was already focused on the next target. That afternoon, I had a video call scheduled with Blue Harbor Solutions, Langston's second-largest client. Their contract wouldn't expire for 2 months, but planting seeds early was crucial. The call went even better than I'd hoped. Blue Harbor's marketing director, Sophie, had always preferred working directly with me rather than going through Langston's bureaucratic channels. "Amanda keeps rescheduling our meetings," she complained. "And when we do connect, she seems unfamiliar with our campaign strategy, which you develop." I made sympathetic noises while silently celebrating. Amanda was doing half my work for me. "We're locked into our contract until December," Sophie continued, "but perhaps we could bring you in as a supplementary consultant in the meantime, just to ensure continuity." It was the perfect Trojan horse, allowing me to demonstrate ARC's value while technically not violating non-compete clauses. By the time Blue Harbor's contract with Langston expired, transitioning to ARC would feel natural, even inevitable. 2 weeks later, Meridian Global, Langston's third major client, reached out to me. Their CEO had heard about Westridge's switch and wanted to explore options. I hadn't even needed to make the first move. By the end of the month, Langston had lost Westridge's business entirely, was sharing Blue Harbor with ARC in an increasingly one-sided arrangement, and was frantically trying to shore up their relationship with Meridian. Carl called twice more. I continued to ignore him. Instead, I focused on delivery. Our team worked around the clock to ensure Westridge received service that didn't just match what Langston had provided, but surpassed it. We implemented the innovative approaches Carl had repeatedly rejected, streamlined reporting processes, and maintained constant communication with the client. The results spoke for themselves. Within 3 weeks, Westridge saw a 12% increase in conversion rates. Tangible proof that ARC wasn't just a revenge vehicle, but a genuinely superior option. "We need to celebrate properly," Marco insisted after we reviewed the first month's performance metrics. "This isn't just a successful launch, it's a coup." He was right. In just 30 days, we'd gone from a concept to a functional company with blue-chip clients and growing momentum. The industry was noticing. I'd received inquiries from 3 potential clients with no previous Langston connection. But as I looked around at my team, Nadia analyzing data trends, Tyler coding our proprietary tracking system, Marco sketching campaign concepts, I realized this had evolved beyond mere revenge. We weren't just taking Langston's clients, we were building something that might never have existed if Carl hadn't betrayed me. I raised my coffee mug. To ARC Strategies. Not just a response to the past, but a blueprint for the future. We were just getting started, and Carl had no idea what was coming next. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday, 3 months after ARC Strategies opened its doors. By then, we'd secured 5 major clients, 3 poached directly from Langston, 2 new to both companies, and doubled our staff to 12 employees. The industry was buzzing about the innovative boutique firm stealing market share from established players. I recognized the letterhead immediately. Jennings and Walsh, Langston's overpriced corporate attorneys. With my team gathered around the conference table for our morning meeting, I sliced open the envelope and skimmed its contents. "Well," I announced, "it seems Langston & Co. is threatening to sue us for tortious interference with business relationships and misappropriation of trade secrets." Nadia's eyes widened. "Can they do that?" "They can try," I replied, passing the letter to Tyler. "But they won't succeed." I'd been expecting this. The moment ARC had taken Meridian Global, Langston's final major client, retribution was inevitable. Carl was too proud, too entitled to accept defeat gracefully. But I'd prepared for this moment since day one. After the meeting, I called my attorney, Meera Patel, a razor-sharp litigator who specialized in business disputes. We'd met at a women's leadership conference years ago and stayed in touch. When I first conceived ARC Strategies, she was among my first call. "They're bluffing," Meera confirmed after reviewing the letter. "Their claims are thin at best. You never signed a non-compete. You haven't used any proprietary information, and clients followed you voluntarily." "I've documented everything," I assured her. Every email where Carl promised my promotion, every instance where they violated their own policies. "Send it all over, and Eliza?" Meera's voice took on a conspiratorial tone. "The timing of this couldn't be better for what's coming next week." What was coming next week was the Northeast Business Innovation Conference, the industry's premier annual event. Both ARC and Langston were registered to attend, and I had been invited to speak on a panel about disruptive business models in traditional industries. "Carl, I knew would be in the audience. For 3 days, I prepared obsessively for that panel, crafting my presentation with surgical precision. This wouldn't be a direct attack on Langston. That would be too obvious, too easily dismissed as bitter. Instead, I developed a masterclass on identifying opportunities in outdated business practices, using anonymous case studies that industry insiders would recognize immediately as Langston's failures. The morning of the conference, I dressed with deliberate care, a tailored crimson suit that radiated confidence, taste of gold accessories, and the diamond earrings Mom had given me after our heart-to-heart. For when you need to remember your worth, she'd said. Today, I needed no reminder, but wearing them felt right. The conference venue hummed with networking professionals when I arrived. I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations on Arc's success, deflecting questions about the rumored legal action, and scanning faces for familiar Langston employees. I spotted Carl first, standing near the refreshment table, looking slightly more haggard than I remembered. Our eyes met briefly before he quickly looked away. Beside him stood Patricia Langston, her expression guarded as she observed the room. No sign of Amanda, I noted with satisfaction. Perhaps the nepotism experiment had already failed. Mira materialized at my elbow, elegant in navy blue. Front row, left side, she whispered. Your documentation was perfect. We filed our response this morning along with our countersuit. I raised an eyebrow. Defamation and tortious interference of your business relationships. They've been calling your clients, suggesting you stole proprietary information. We have sworn statements from 2 CEOs. A warm sense of vindication washed over me as I took my place on the panel. The moderator introduced each speaker, saving me for last. And finally, the woman everyone's been talking about, Eliza Chen, founder and CEO of ARC Strategies, the fastest growing firm in the sector this year. Applause rippled through the room as I adjusted my microphone. In my peripheral vision, I saw Carl shift uncomfortably. Thank you, I began. I'd like to discuss how companies often fail despite having exceptional talent and resources, and how those failures create opportunities for more agile competitors. For the next 20 minutes, I walked the audience through my analysis, never once mentioning Langston by name, but outlining their exact failures: resistance to innovation, failure to value top performers, prioritizing nepotism over merit, and clinging to outdated methodologies. With each point, I contrasted these mistakes with ARC's approach, backed by concrete metrics showing our superior results. When an organization refuses to evolve, I concluded, they don't just lose market share, they lose the very talent that could have saved them. Their failure becomes the foundation for their competitors' success. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Questions followed, thoughtful inquiries about scalability, talent retention, and client acquisition. I answered each with confidence and specificity, aware that every response further cemented ARC's reputation as a serious contender, not just a flash in the pan. After the panel, a small crowd gathered around me. From across the room, I could see Carl and Patricia in heated conversation, repeatedly glancing in my direction. Whatever strategy they'd planned for managing my presence at the conference was clearly disintegrating. As the crowd thinned, a familiar voice spoke behind me. That was quite a performance. I turned to find Patricia Langston standing alone, her expression unreadable. It wasn't a performance, I replied evenly. Just facts and analysis. Patricia nodded slowly. Carl assured me that your departure was necessary, that Amanda brought fresh perspectives we needed. And how has that worked out? I couldn't resist asking. Amanda resigned last week. Patricia's lips thinned. Our quarterly projections are concerning. I allowed myself a small smile. That sounds challenging. Indeed, Patricia held my gaze. Our attorneys will be contacting yours about withdrawing our complaint. A wise decision. Patricia hesitated, then added, for what it's worth, I wasn't aware of Carl's promises regarding your promotion. The restructuring was his initiative entirely. Before I could respond, she turned and walked away, leaving me to wonder if her revelation was meant as an apology or simply damage control. The news spread quickly throughout the conference. Langston was dropping their legal threats against ARC Strategies. By evening, 3 more potential clients had requested meetings. At the closing reception, I caught sight of Carl standing alone by a window, looking out at the city skyline. For a moment, I considered approaching him, saying something cutting, something triumphant. Instead, I turned away. He wasn't worth the words anymore. My phone buzzed with a text from Nadia. "Check your email. You're not gonna believe who just sent their resume." I opened my email to find an application from one of Langston's remaining senior managers, along with detailed information about their rapidly deteriorating client relationships. The coup wasn't just complete, it was becoming a rout. 6 months after the conference, I stood at the windows of ARC Strategy's new headquarters, a full floor in a downtown high-rise with views that made my old corner office dreams at Langston seem laughably small. Behind me, 38 employees worked at sleek workstations, managed projects for 22 clients, and generated monthly revenues that had already surpassed Langston's peak numbers during my tenure there. The quarterly financial report sat on my desk, freshly prepared by our CFO, a position that hadn't even existed 2 months ago. The numbers told a story more satisfying than any revenge fantasy I could have crafted. 200% growth, profit margins that outperformed industry standards by double, and a waitlist of potential clients eager to work with us. But it was the industry news bulletin in my inbox that completed the narrative. Langston & Co. announces restructuring after 40% profit decline. I should have felt nothing but triumph. Yet as I scanned the details, layoffs, office downsizing, desperate attempts to rebrand, I felt an unexpected twinge of something like sympathy. Not for Carl, whose leadership failures had created this outcome, but for the rank-and-file employees who were losing jobs because of his mistakes. My phone chimed with a text from Mom. "Dinner's still on for tonight. Danny's bringing that nice doctor she's been seeing." I smiled and replied, "Wouldn't miss it." And yes, I remembered to make the reservation. This was perhaps the most profound change, not the office or the client list or the profits, but the fact that I hadn't missed a family dinner in months. My calendar now contained more than just work appointments. It held birthday celebrations, weekend hikes, and actual vacation days. ARC was consuming less of my life than Langston ever had, yet accomplishing infinitely more. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. Nadia stood there with Tyler and Marco, my original team, now department heads with their own staff. "Got a minute?" Nadia asked, uncharacteristically hesitant. "Of course." I gestured them in, curious about their solemn expressions. Tyler closed the door behind them. "We just heard about Langston's restructuring announcement." "I saw the bulletin," I nodded. 40% down since we launched. "Word in the industry is it's worse than they're admitting," Marco added. "They've lost their 3 remaining major accounts in the past month alone." And Nadia hesitated. "Carl's been removed as CEO. The board voted him out yesterday." A strange feeling washed over me. Not the vindictive satisfaction I might have expected 6 months ago, but something more complex. Carl had destroyed his own company through the same poor judgment that had led him to discard me. "I see," I said simply. "There's more," Tyler continued. "We've been contacted by 4 Langston employees asking about positions here. Good people who are worried about the company's survival." I walked back to my desk, considering the implications. ARC was growing, yes, but could we absorb 4 new salaries? Did we want to be seen as actively poaching from a dying competitor? "What do you think we should do?" I asked, valuing their input as I always had. The 3 exchanged glances before Nadia spoke. "We think we should interview them, not out of revenge, but because they're talented people who shouldn't suffer for Carl's mistakes." I smiled, pride warming my chest. This team I'd built understood what mattered, not crushing competitors but building something worthwhile. "Set up the interviews," I agreed. "And let's develop a specific onboarding plan for former Langston employees. They'll need support transitioning to our culture." After they left, my phone rang. A number I didn't recognize. I almost sent it to voicemail before curiosity won out. Eliza Chen. "Eliza? It's Carl." My breath caught. After all this time, his voice still triggered an immediate tension in my shoulders. "What can I do for you, Carl?" I kept my tone professionally neutral. He paused, and I could almost picture him straightening his tie nervously. "I wanted to reach out personally. I assume you've heard about the changes at Langston." "I have. The board feels." Another pause. "I feel that mistakes were made in how your departure was handled." I almost laughed at the passive construction. Mistakes were made. Not "I made a terrible mistake" or "I betrayed you after years of dedicated service." Yes, I agreed, simply. They were. Look, Eliza, his voice took on an urgent quality. You've built something impressive at ARC. Very impressive. I've been thinking that perhaps there's a way we could discuss some form of collaboration. And there it was. The real reason for his call. Not apology, not amends, but a desperate attempt to save himself by attaching to my success. I don't think that would be beneficial for ARC strategies, I replied calmly. Please, just consider it. We have history. Yes, we do. I cut him off, and that history is precisely why this conversation is over. Goodbye, Carl. I ended the call and turned back to the window, looking out at the city where both our companies operated. His shrinking, mine flourishing. The satisfaction I felt wasn't about his failure, I realized, but about my success despite his attempts to erase me. My assistant knocked lightly at the door. Your 2 o'clock is here. The Blake Foundation. I nodded, gathering my materials for the meeting. The Blake Foundation represented something new for ARC. Our first major non-fraud client, a step toward the more balanced portfolio I'd been wanting to build. This wasn't in the original revenge plan. It was something better. As I walked to the conference room, I passed the company mission statement we'd crafted together as a team, mounted prominently on the wall, building success through innovation, integrity, and genuine partnership. Not a word about being the biggest or crushing competitors. Nothing about revenge or proving points. Just a commitment to doing business the right way, the way I'd always wanted to at Langston, but had never been empowered to implement. I greeted the Blake Foundation representatives with genuine enthusiasm, ready to show them how ARC could support their important work. As we settled into the presentation, I realized I hadn't thought about Carl or Langston once during my preparation. They were becoming irrelevant to my story, a painful chapter, but no longer the defining one. They had tried to erase me, but instead had freed me to create something far more meaningful than a VP title could ever have been. I hadn't just replaced what I'd lost, I'd transcended it entirely. I didn't need their promotion after all. I had promoted myself,